Welcome to Biology My Passion. I am Soumya Harikrishna. Today we are starting a new chapter, Evolution. Evolutionary biology is a branch of biology that deals with the study of history of life on Earth. That means we are not thinking about certain facts or we are not experimenting or finding out what's going to happen in future, but rather we are looking back to the history, or we are peeping into the development of flora and fauna or the changes they have undergone over millions of years. But we know our Earth on which this life exists is only a speck if we consider the whole universe or the cosmos. So before we learn in detail about the life, origin and its evolution, it is better for us to know in detail about the origin of universe. So let us start with that. What is meant by universe or cosmos? The entire space and matter available was called a universe. And in that universe now we have 100 billion galaxies, and we are in a galaxy called the Akash Ganga or Milky Way. And within each galaxy there are around 100 billion stars also. So huge. So the formation of all these galaxies and stars were explained by a single theory called the Big Bang theory, which was proposed by a scientist called Lemaitre in the year 1931. It occurred 20 billion years ago. All these dates are important. 20 billion years ago, there occurred a huge explosion, unimaginable in physical terms. That means if normal people like us, if we start thinking about how it happened or how big it was, not possible, because unimaginable, such a huge physical explosion happened. Okay, that led to the expansion of the cosmos. So the matter and the space spread around, forming, whenever there is an explosion, at least you must have seen in movies, there is a lot of commotion and chaos after that. What is the condition after that? Full of dust, smoke and scattered particles, everything, right? The same here also. Particles which got separated from the universe, that became individual galaxy. Now within individual galaxy, what happened? Again the particles, they were all spinning, they were all moving, which consisted of lighter elements, heavier elements, then other particles, hot gases, everything. Everything was revolving in a circular path, and that is called a nebula, because they formed a large cold cloud of dust. That is called a nebula, and plural it is nebulae, and each nebula became one galaxy. That was the proposal by Kant, one scientist, and this is called a nebula hypothesis. Earth originated only 4.5 billion years ago. That means after that Big Bang, which happened in 20 billion years ago, it took almost 15.5 billion years for the formation of our planet Earth. Now, once initially when I told these all were spinning, right? So because of these particles, the dust, the smoke, the other elements and everything, hot gases, everything started spinning like this, forming a galaxy. So slowly what happened? All the hot gases came to the center and settled, forming the sun, which is our central star. Okay, so hot gases came to the center, forming the star, sun. Then later all these particles, again they are spinning. Slowly they started condensing at different regions, forming a planet. Suppose this is Earth. Like this, many planets formed. Along with planets, what else formed? The comets formed, the satellites and the asteroids also formed. So they all started taking a particular orbit in which they could revolve around the sun. Okay. So now when we talk about Earth, initially when Earth formed, it had two components, the lithosphere and the atmosphere. But atmosphere was not like ours, the present atmosphere, and later only hydrosphere formed. So again when these were spinning to form the Earth, what happened? All the heavy ones, that is the heavier metals like iron, nickel and all, they came to the center, but the temperature was very high inside. So as a result they started melting. So in the molten form they all accumulated in the center, forming the core of the Earth. It is otherwise called a baryosphere. Okay, so after that what happened? The lighter ones are all still in the outside, like silicates and carbides. They form the lithosphere or the crust of the Earth. Whereas the medium level, that is in between the crust and core, there is a layer that formed because of iron, magnesium, silicates, etc., and that is mantle. So here also iron we are seeing, inside it is molten stage, and this is the kind of solid state. So this is how slowly the earth formed or it gained its spherical shape. Now conditions we have to think. That time temperature was very high, thousands of degrees Celsius, and also the atmosphere had a frequent lightning, that is voltage source was there, and also UV rays were directly falling. We did not have that blanket to cover us, which is the ozone layer, had not formed then. So all the UV rays, cosmic rays started falling directly on the earth, making it very difficult to survive, or that time life was not there, and there were water vapor in the atmosphere. So this water vapors immediately would split up to form hydrogen and oxygen, and hydrogen being lighter escaped into the atmosphere, whereas oxygen also could not stay like a molecular oxygen. So immediately what would it do? It will combine with the other elements or to form carbon, to form methane, or nitrogen to form ammonia, and all different compounds were formed. And also some oxygen split to become nascent oxygen. That nascent oxygen combined with molecular oxygen to form ozone layer. So ozone layer also formed. So slowly then the water vapor started falling down because temperature was reducing. The water vapor started condensing and falling as a water in the liquid form, or it was actually very high temperature, so initially all the water would evaporate immediately back. Meanwhile, tectonic plates formed on the surface of earth, volcanic eruptions were there, which all led to some elevations and depressions on the surface. So all these water slowly, initially it evaporated back, again it kept on raining for thousands of years. So whenever we talk about certain time period in evolution, it refers to millions of years or thousands of years. Okay, so it kept on raining so many years. Finally, water accumulated on all depressions, leading to the formation of oceans. And 4 billion years ago, life started. When we are telling life started, don't think that life started as a human beings or a complex animals. No, the molecules of life started. Now let us talk about evolution of life, or otherwise called a biopoiesis. So there are several theories, very interesting theories also, explaining this particular topic. That is theory of special creation. Theory of special creation is a theory that is actually believed by all religions. According to all religions, the life was created on earth by God or the supreme power. So if you see the Bible, you know God created everything in a span of 6 days, and 7th day he took rest. And the first man was Adam and a woman was Eve. The same way, in the case of Islam also, the names of first man and woman are the same, but it was by the wish of God or word of God the life was created. In Hindu mythology it states that Lord Brahma, who is the Lord of creation, he created everything from different parts of his head, and he created the first man called Manu, and the first woman was Shraddha. So only names are changing, but ultimately theory is the same. So this theory has got mainly 3 postulates. According to this, all life forms, whether it is from bacteria to the complex mammals, everything was created during the same time, or there is only a short span of time. Maybe 6 days means maybe 1 day or 2 days difference only. But we cannot accept that in terms of science, because we have evidence for evolution. So if everything was created as such, there is no scope for evolution, but still we have evolutionary evidences. And also from the time of creation, they were created in the same form as they exist now, and they are not undergoing any change throughout the course of life or throughout the course of evolution or the time period. That is also unacceptable. We know the origin or evolution of species is happening or has happened and is still continuing, right? And all organs and the body is created in such a way that it is designed to adjust with the existing environment, so there is no scope for evolution again. And if you see the special creation theory, the earth is only 4,000 years old. That's also not true. So as a religious person, we all can believe that in the power of the supremacy or our God. But as scientists or evolutionary biologist or the student of evolutionary biology, we have to think of other theories. Next theory we have to discuss here is theory of spontaneous generation. So theory of spontaneous generation is very interesting. They believe that the life originates from some non-living things all of a sudden, just like that spontaneously. Because you have to imagine that was a time where there was no refrigerator, no proper sewage treatment plants and all. So whenever they found a pile of garbage or from the sewage water, some rats were coming out or rodents were coming out, people believe they all formed in that pile of garbage or the sewage. And some of them believe that the rotten meat can produce flies, because after butchering the meat, if they are keeping it aside, no, we know that it will get rotten. So from that we could find some larvae of the flies or later flies coming out. So they thought the rotten meat produced this flies. Okay. And the people who in Egypt, they lived near the bank of river Nile, and after each rainy season, once the Nile would flood, after flooding it would bring the fertile soil to the shore. So once the water recedes back, the people would go there for cultivation. That was the fertile soil for them to do agriculture. So that time they would find the frogs and salamanders and snakes or crocodiles in the river of river Nile. So by seeing these frogs in the wet soil, they thought that these animals formed there itself from the mud of Nile. That was their belief, because they did not find these animals during dry soil or dry conditions, right? So that they believed like that. And even Aristotle, he came up with the theory that the insects are forming from the morning dew and also from the rotten manure, etc. And there were many scientists, some scientists like Van Helmont, he came up with some recipes for creating organisms. So during that time, the leftover wheat or the wheat they had to store, they used to keep it in the places which was only thatched. So in that case, water could come inside, spoiling the wheat and making it molded, right, fungal growth. So from that, many microbes also started growing and the rodents also formed. So they thought from the molded wheat all these organisms are originating. So he gave an interesting recipe that he kept one old t-shirt, a shirt with a lot of sweat and dust and dirt, everything in a cupboard, along with a handful of wheat, because they thought wheat is also necessary. And they closed the cupboard. After a few days when they opened, they could find some mice coming out. So he told this is the recipe for making mice. And even William Harvey, he also supported the theory of special creation. But we know later some scientists disproved the theory by their experiments. Now let us see certain evidences scientists provided against the theory of special creation. So first one was Francisco Redi. What did he do? He took meat or fish and he kept it in 3 different jars. Okay. The first jar he left open. The next jar he closed with a wire gauze or a muslin cloth so that the air could pass and the microbes could enter. And the third one he kept closed with a parchment paper or completely sealed. So he kept it for a few days, and after a few days he found the one which was kept open had development of larvae and flies, because the flies could come inside and lay eggs on the meat, rotten meat, and that developed into new flies. Whereas in the second one covered with a muslin cloth or the wire gauze, the fly could not go inside to lay eggs, so they laid eggs on the surface, because naturally all the flies got attracted by the rotten meat, but they are not able to go inside the jar. So they laid eggs on the surface of that muslin cloth. Whereas in the third one covered with parchment paper, they could not find any larvae or flies, because that was completely sealed. Okay, so from this he understood that the microbial growth or the larvae or flies formed only in the one which was kept open. That showed it was not forming from the meat, but it is the animal that is visiting there is reproducing. Okay, so that was the experiment by Francisco Redi. The second experiment was done by Spallanzani. He boiled animal and vegetable broth for several minutes so that it could be completely sterilized, and immediately he sealed it. And he kept it for a few days. He did not find any microbial growth. So he concluded that on boiling or sterilizing, all the microbes are killed so that no life form could originate. And the third person was Louis Pasteur, who forever wiped off this misconception of spontaneous generation through his experiment. And for his experiment, he first took a very long necked flask, and then he heated it to bend the neck of the flask. So it became an S-shaped curve, or we call it as swan-necked flask. and inside he took some yeast and sugar solution, hay infusion sometimes we say, and it was boiled continuously. And once this steam came up, it was allowed to condense or cool down in the curved neck, and that condensed water actually came to the lower part of the neck and it blocked the entry of microbes into the content inside the flask. He kept this for several months and found not even a single microbial growth. Whereas in the water that was collected, microbial growth was there, which trapped the microbes. So from this he understood, or he proved, that the life originated from pre-existing life. That was his theory. Life originates from pre-existing life. The next theory about biopoiesis is theory of catastrophism. It is actually a modification of special creation. In special creation we found there did not happen any evolution or change. All the creations were exactly like how we are today, right? But this was modified by catastrophic theory. That means after the existence of each species, there occurred a catastrophe or a disaster which wiped off all the earth or the life on earth. Then again the life restarted, but the newly formed ones were different from the previous one. Then they were wiped off. Again the next one formed previously different from the previous. Like that they explained the changes that happened. Next theory was by Greek mythologists, or Greek people believed in this cosmozoic theory or interplanetary theory, or it is also called a panspermia theory. So according to them, the life came from another planet where life already existed in the form of certain spores. It came to the earth. Since the conditions were favorable, those spores developed into life. So the advocates of this theory were Richter and Arrhenius. But we know, as of now, we don't know about life existing in any other planet. Then how can life come from other planets in a meteorite or in the form of a spaceship that we can see only in fictional movies, right? Next theory is steady state theory. According to this theory, as the name suggests, steady state, the life has ever been in existence as at present and will continue to be like this forever. So we discussed several theories related to origin of life. The final theory that we all have approved is the chemical origin of life. It was proposed by two scientists, A.I. Oparin of Russia, he was a biochemist, and a biologist of London, that is J.B.S. Haldane. These two scientists proposed the theory of chemical evolution, because when we learned Louis Pasteur's theory, which disproved spontaneous generation, he told life originates from the pre-existing life only. Okay, we know evolution also states that. But first life, how did it originate? So that was the question in front of scientists. So Oparin and Haldane told life as abiogenesis first, that is spontaneous generation or the development of life from non-living substance is called abiogenesis, and from another life is called biogenesis. So as first it was abiogenesis, then biogenesis ever since. Okay, so like that chemical evolution solved all the problems or the confusions related to development of life. According to these two scientists, life originated initially in the form by abiogenesis, and after that what happened? Due to the conditions of earth during that time, some primitive biomolecules formed. So from those biomolecules, that is they formed actually the organic molecules of the biomolecules formed by certain chemical reactions which happened, and they formed from inorganic elements. So inorganic molecules gave rise to organic molecules. Organic molecules gradually became life. But for that what favored the conditions of earth that time? Many times we told the condition was high temperature, reducing atmosphere. Reducing atmosphere means what? Oxygen was absent, right? Free oxygen was absent. Then the continuous rain happened after that, and also volcanic eruptions, then frequent thunder, lightning. All these favored the chemical evolution of life. Now let us discuss how did it happen. Now let us see the sequence in which the chemical evolution occurred. That I already mentioned in the beginning, but the same concept in detail form we will see now. That is, initially when the elements and the dust particles, everything getting condensed, we know during that is formation of earth, the heavier ones like iron, nickel all went to the center and formed the core of the earth in the molten form. Then iron, magnesium, silicates and all form the mantle, and carbides and silicates form the crust of the earth, right, or lithosphere. And during that time, in the atmosphere, the conditions were not favorable or temperature was very high. In that atmosphere, the elements like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur all were present. They all were in the elemental forms. Okay. Then what happened? These are all inorganic molecules. Slowly, they started reacting with each other because of the conditions, and it became methane, ammonia, carbon dioxide, water vapor. That is, this oxygen, though it was present, it was not available free. What happened? The oxygen kept on reacting with others, and hydrogen also very reactive. It started reacting with other molecules like carbon and hydrogen combined to form methane, nitrogen and hydrogen formed ammonia, carbon and oxygen formed carbon dioxide, water in the form of water vapor. Now, what happened during that time, you have to imagine the temperature was reducing. It came almost to 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, and also the UV radiation still continued because of the lack of ozone layer. And cosmic radiations were there, splitting up these molecules again, then they are forming again, splitting up again, forming again. This kept on going. Then electric shock was also there in the form of lightning, continuous lightning, and volcanic storms were there. Volcanic eruption used to occur very frequently over the surface of Earth, and at the same time Earth also formed many elevations and depressions. Now under this condition, what happened? These elements got washed off in the rain. I told once the temperature reduced, the water falling down in the form of liquid, and that was the hot rain which happened in the beginning. So it started filling all the depressions. So when it was coming down, what happened? All these molecules also got dissolved in water and it came down. So in the water there were many chemicals, and they all continued reaction even within the water. So that was mentioned by Oparin as hot dilute soup, because it was not water, it was a kind of soup in which all these molecules were there, or it was called a primordial broth, or we can say prebiotic soup, that is before life, that soup. Okay, from that life originated. Then what happened? In that soup, the reactions continued. So all these inorganic molecules reacted among themselves to form certain organic molecules. Which were they? Fatty acids, amino acids, purines, pyrimidines, pentose and hexose sugars, alcohols, aldehydes, etc. These are all micromolecules, right? Or they are the monomers which can form polymers. So initially the micromolecules or the monomers formed. Then gradually what happened? These monomers combined to form the macromolecules or the polymers like proteins, polysaccharides, nucleic acids, etc. Then the micromolecules or the nucleoproteins formed by the combination of monomers, the polymers, they started aggregating together or clumping together, and they formed the macromolecules or the polymers, and they evolved into something called the protobions by 3 billion years ago. So once again I am reminding you, 4.5 billion years ago Earth originated. After 500 million years ago or 4 billion years ago, life originated. Means that is from the very primitive, this inorganic molecule and all slowly coming. First non-cellular form, even now cell has not formed. Non-cellular form of life is called a protobion, which actually formed 3 billion years ago only. Then different types of protobions are explained. Oparin made one or suggested one called a coa cervix. Different scientists gave different names. Okay. Then these protobions eventually evolved, and they formed actually a layer of lipoprotein. Means we know all our membranes are made up of lipoproteinaceous combination. So lipoprotein membrane formed, and they started forming RNA, which is the first genetic material, right? In molecular genetics we discussed RNA was the first genetic material. Then that gave rise to the first cell called a protocell or a eobiont, okay, which was formed 2 billion years ago. Conditions are still same: hot dilute soup, UV radiations, and plenty of lightning. And because of all these, proteins which were formed slowly started taking up the function of enzymes, and the organic molecules collected to form something called a cytoplasm. So slowly there originated the first cellular form of life called a prokaryotes. Initially formed ones were chemoautotrophs, that they could derive energy from chemical substances. But slowly the pigments also formed, and the pigments started absorbing light energy from sun and started using that. The organisms became photoautotrophs. And slowly from prokaryotes what developed? Eukaryotes around 1.6 billion years ago. So this is the chemical evolution of life proposed by Oparin and Haldane, but the experimental proof was given by the apparatus designed by Miller and Yuri. Let us now discuss Urey-Miller experiment, which is the experimental evidence for Oparin and Haldane's theory, chemical evolution of life. So actually Miller set up the experiment, whereas Yuri was actually guiding. He was a professor of Miller, and it is known as Urey-Miller experiment. So these scientists in 1953 started their experiment. They took ammonia, methane and hydrogen in the ratio 2:2:1. And also water vapor was present in the primitive atmosphere. So to give water in the form of gaseous form, they had another chamber in which they took water and boiled it. So the steam rose up and it went to the other chamber where all the other components were there. And temperature was kept very high, almost 800 degrees Celsius. And also two electrodes, we know frequent lightning happened. So to give that effect, they kept two voltaic electrodes also to provide the electricity or the spark. And they ran this experiment or continuously ran this setup for around 18 days. So the simulation was exactly like the primitive atmosphere. So after 18 days, they collected the condensed water. We know once the vapor is passing through that everything, they collected the water which was collected, the condensed and cooled water they took out, and in the sample they could find many amino acids. Almost 15 amino acids were reported. That proved the Oparin and Haldane theory, which proposed life originated from chemicals. But actually Miller could not find all the amino acids, but in 2007 he passed away. After that, the original vial in which he had kept all the samples were studied by many other scientists. When they analyzed it, they could find almost more than 20 types of amino acids. That means almost all amino acids could be created in the simulation that he prepared. Okay, so what are the conditions that favor the formation of life? First one was mutation. We know IUV can cause mutation. Drastic mutation could happen due to the exposure to UV rays and other cosmic rays. There were self-replicating molecules like what? The RNA, right? RNA was there, then RNA became DNA. They all could replicate themselves. So that was another condition for this. And also supply of free energy, lots of energy in the form of lightning and in the form of UV rays and in the form of high temperature, everything. The energy was very high, so that also favored all these processes of formation of life. Here one thing you have to remember, initially though the chemical reactions happened in the hot dilute soup and it changed into protobions and protocells and all, but later the formation of molecules from inorganic ones stopped. Only these existing organic molecules could produce molecules of its own kind. Okay, so here we are just concluding the first part of evolution. We will meet in the next video with more details. If you like my videos, please like, share and subscribe to my channel, Biology My Passion.